This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Joining us today is Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, following news from the company from their KSZ project in Botswana, with recent drilling not encountering the hoped-for nickel or copper sulfides, and thus the RNS stating the current drill campaign will now end. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Ben. First of all, how are you doing? It's been a little while since we've spoken.
Yeah, honestly, been better, Mark. Very disappointing result this week. Huge amount of effort and resource went into this, and obviously, unfortunately, we've not hit what we were hoping for. So it's been a very disappointing end to what was otherwise a really superbly executed campaign by our team. So yeah, we've been better, but we do need to pick ourselves up now, dust ourselves off, and get on with the job.
Well, I do know you were always quite excited and you had a lot of hope, let's say, for this project. You were very keen to get exploring in the area. I do have quite a number of questions for you, so I might just say you can perhaps keep the answers shorter than perhaps usual, then it helps us to get through them all in not too long. But first of all, what specific factors do you believe contributed to the failure to encounter the mineralisation you were hoping for, to find that nickel and copper at your various targets there at the KSZ?
Well, without wishing to sound flippant, Mark, the simple answer is it just wasn't there. If you look back to Richard Hornsey's report from last summer, he did say that one of the risks in this type of exploration and using the type of methods that we have, using this EM technology, this electromagnetic, different forms of technology to identify drill targets, that graphite is a risk. Graphite can be highly conductive, particularly if it's sort of laid out and it's aligned in certain orientations, and it can have very conductive properties. And obviously we were looking at this from surface, so the only way we could know for certain what was there was to drill it. And in this instance, I'm afraid Mother Nature hasn't been very kind to us. It was a grade A target. The team did some excellent work, both with identifying it and doing what they could to de-risk it. And unfortunately, this time it just hasn't gone in our favour.
I mean, would you say it's as simple as that? It's a duster. It's nature. You thought something was there, and it simply isn't. Does that mean that you could effectively just drop the project altogether and focus efforts elsewhere?
I wouldn't say we're going to drop the project altogether, but we do have to think very seriously now about how much we invest in this project in the near term. We know that the targets are very deep, and if we look at the process that it took to get to this point, the first of all in identifying the target and then obviously with drilling it, this form of exploration is extremely expensive. Now, obviously the potential targets are huge. If you do identify one of these nickel copper sulfide ore bodies, then it could be a multi-billion-dollar find. But they are also, as Richard Hornsey told us last summer, they are the equivalent of a geological lightning strike. And one of the big challenges we have in the KSZ is the fact that we're dealing with so much cover between surface and the targets themselves. So we need to go a bit back to the drawing board. We're going to do quite a thorough review of our existing data. I think for the KSZ North, I think we probably are going to sort of focus more now towards KSZ South. We know that the Shiny complex is closer to surface there. That's a historically very underexplored region. But in terms of Kavango and the next steps with the financing that we have lined up, we've got much lower hanging fruit elsewhere in Botswana in the KCB. So the Karakubis license block that we talked about a bit earlier this year. And of course with our new Zim Gold project as well. So for our drilling activities in the second half of this year, we're looking for lower hanging fruit.
Okay. You mentioned the discovery there of graphite. How does the discovery of this material and the pyrite-rich bands affect the overall potential? I mean, is there any potential commercial value in these findings or not?
No.
Nothing. Okay,
no.
As simple as that.
You asked for simple answers. No. We've got to be absolutely straight here. No, this campaign hasn't worked. It's not lived up to our expectations.
Okay. So the decision then to end the drilling campaign is as simple as it's not there, it's not what you were hoping for. What lessons might you say could have been, there's always lessons to be learned, what lessons would you say have been learned from the exploration in the KSZ, and how might they help inform future decision making? You've mentioned the KSZ South, but also, I mean, the other projects, but very different geology, I suppose, aren't they? So, I mean, there must have been some lessons perhaps learnt, though, generally, Ben, would you say?
Well, there's a lot that we've learned in terms of the application of this technology and the deployment of the technology. The methods itself are right. You know, we don't have any doubt about that. But it obviously it's a risky form of exploration, particularly when looking at targets that are so much deeper. So I think the main thing that we've learned, or the main things that we've learned as a company, is how to use the TDEM technology in particular, combining that with the CSAMT and the airborne surveys and the ground gravity work that we did. So the toolkit that we have available to us really is first rate. We've got great guys in Jeremy and Hillary who really, they do excellent work. And in this instance, unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. But that's not to say that it won't work out for us next time. So we are looking at a number of options and how we can potentially deploy those skills and this technology in the future. But for the time being, it is certainly back to the drawing board in the KSZ.
Okay. Now, shareholders have perhaps expressed some disappointment and concern, of course, about the lack of general progress and in the exploration. Of course, I think you stated making big discoveries. I'm paraphrasing, but I recall that was something your statement you made at some point in one of our interviews is making major discoveries. Of course, you can't predict nature. Are you a bit concerned that you got a bit too laser focused on the KSZ?
I think we had to drill this target. It was a 28,000 Siemens conductor. That is a grade A target in the search for nickel copper sulfide bodies. It would have been a mistake simply to have walked away from that and not established what was down there. So yeah, we have been focused on it, and yes, it has cost the company. But I don't think anybody a few months ago, was telling us to abandon the KSZ. And I'm afraid to say a lot of these people, particularly the ones who are making the most noise at the moment, these are the ones who are demanding that we drilled the KSZ as quickly as possible. So, I'm afraid, look, in this instance, it just simply hasn't worked out. We have to accept that. We have to figure out sort of what we can learn from this, and we have to move on.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to hear that you're not afraid to move on. I think we discussed that before. If something turns out not to be working out, you can move on. Something else, you won't get too attached to a project to sort of love struck on a project. What might you say to shareholders who are disappointed as well as you are, but also some people have expressed radio silence from the company? What sort of steps will you be taking going forward with the other projects, and of course keeping shareholders informed on the story?
Well, there wasn't really anything for us to inform people with on this drill. We said we would put an announcement out once we had anything to report. We obviously didn't hit anything, so there wasn't anything to report there until we reached the end of the hole. And in this instance, we put the announcement out within an hour of hitting final depth, so we were ready to go on this. We put the announcement out as quickly as we could. I know the result has been very disappointing, and believe me, Mark, I mean, I'm quite a large shareholder myself. This does hurt. It hurts financially, it hurts in terms of the disappointment and all the time and effort and energy that the team has put into this. So yeah, we are all hurting from this one, but we do have to move on. And yeah, it is disappointing. So what can I say in terms of what we'll do in the future? Well, I think we've actually handled this in the right way. There isn't really much more we could have done in this instance, Mark. The simple fact is the geology wasn't in our favour.
Okay. So with the focus now shifting to the KCB and your new Zimbabwean gold opportunity, how confident are you of the chances of success in these projects, and what factors make them look more promising than the KSZ North project?
So in the KCB, we've now focused on the Karakubis licence block. What I'm feeling a lot more confident about in the KCB is that we've now got Dave Catterall, who's guiding the company, which means we've finally got a serious heavyweight geologist who actually knows what he's talking about. This has been something that the company has severely lacked in the past. So a lot of the work that Kavango unfortunately has done in the KCB to date has been pretty misguided. Now we've learned from that, and we've learned a hell of a lot from Dave. I was out in Botswana with Dave at the start of June. I spent 2 weeks with him. We went and did a site visit to both the KCB and to go and look at the detail cores together. And then we spent time together in Gaborone meeting with various people there. So Dave I mean, Dave's story and his background, he is one of the leading experts on KCB exploration. He was the man who led to the discovery of Zone 5, so the deep underground mine that's owned by Khoemacau Mining. And he's put together for us an extremely compelling exploration plan. He understands the regional geology, I think, probably better than anyone does. Now, again, there are no guarantees in this business. We're dealing with, again, targets that are undercover, nowhere near as much cover as in the KSZ, but it's still pretty risky exploration. But we're doing everything that we can to increase our chances of success. So we'll have an announcement out very soon about our KCB plans, and particularly with Dave's guidance, that's what's giving me a lot more confidence and hope for the future. In terms of Zimbabwe, well, I then went and spent the next 2 weeks in Zim. So this is the fourth time I've been to Zimbabwe since last August, and we haven't talked too much about it yet. I know you're going to be asking me a few more questions about Zim in a moment, but it's the geological potential down there is just absolutely incredible, Mark. I know you've been there yourself, so you've actually seen some of this. But the ancient rocks that are at surface, these Archean greenstone belts, they are a genuine world-class opportunity that's been underexplored because of a lot of the trouble that the country has had over the last 40 years. So from a geological perspective, it's just an amazing jurisdiction with wonderful potential very near surface. So it's right down Kavango Street for us to go and explore.
Okay, great. So you'll be giving some more information on the KCB fairly soon on the exploration plans there, and Zim not much longer to wait for some plans to see on there as well, Ben.
Yeah, so on Zim, we're going to be taking quite a cautious approach in terms of what we say about Zim. As everyone knows, the main sort of risk in Zimbabwe is the jurisdictional risk. So we won't be promoting too much about what we're doing there. We're actually just going to be getting on with the job. We anonymised the project in the announcement that we put out. There are some details that we've kept commercially confidential because at this stage, just while we're getting ourselves established, it's a jurisdiction that you have to enter into with your eyes wide open. So it's a great jurisdiction in many ways. There are some wonderful people down there, some great talent, fantastic projects as well, and the infrastructure is lends itself towards much easier exploration, certainly than in the more remote parts of the Kalahari Desert that we've been operating in previously.
Okay. Well, before I get on to a few shareholder questions, I just have another question to ask you with regards how the company plans to preserve and optimize its working capital for the other projects, and if you can provide any more information on the completion of the 4.6 million investment from Pure Bond.
Yeah, well, I spoke with Bullock and Sagra, who you hosted that event with about 6 weeks ago. Obviously, on the news of this disappointing news this week, we've still got the full support of Pure Bond, so we're pushing ahead with the stage 2 financing. I'm in the process of finishing the prospectus at the moment. We hope to issue that a bit later this month, with a view then to completing that in August. That will still be going ahead at 1p a share. That's the deal that's been agreed, and now we're sticking to that. So yeah, we expect it all to be put to a shareholder vote at some point in August. That's the plan.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Ben. So, as I say, I do have some questions from shareholders here, so I'll put them straight to you. So, starting off on the project in Zimbabwe, the Nara project, who specifically holds the current license and which companies were involved in the previous mining and exploration there?
So there's been some absurd speculation on this that I want to put to bed. This has got nothing to do with Michael Foster or Paul Johnson or whatever other ridiculous conspiracy theory certain people are trying to push about this project. The vendor has owned the project for 35 years, which in Zimbabwe is quite rare. I'm going to be doing a presentation in the near future about the gold exploration market in Zim. But you have what are called gold claims. They're basically 10-hectare blocks that are designed or are made available to enable small-scale miners to mine. Once you have a gold claim, you can hold it in perpetuity so long as you're doing work on it. Now, what's fairly rare in Zim is to find blocks of these claims that sit on top of a potential ore body. So one of the big attractions about this project is it's quite a large number of claims that are all stitched together all along this 4.2 kilometre strike that we're about to explore. Now, the owner of this, he's a private individual. He's got no connection to Kavango, no connection to Pure Bond, no connection to anybody in the markets. He's just simply a local Zimbabwean who we're buying the project off. We kept his details out of the public domain for now because while we're going through our work program, he's entitled to his privacy. So at the point, obviously, that we exercise, that will be a different matter because at that point, everything will go in through a proper reporting process. But for the time being, really out of respect for him and his family, we're keeping the project details private.
Okay. What makes you think that Nara is nothing more than a rethread of what shareholders have already currently experienced with Kavango? And have any Chinese mining companies already carried out exploration on the Zim licenses?
I've been there, Mark. I've been there and I've seen this project and I've seen what it's sustained. It's sustained 35 years of contract mining. So sort of locals have been doing effectively artisanal mining on the high grade elements of the project. But no one's ever tested its bulk potential. So it's never been touched by any other larger firms. It's not been explored by the Chinese or by anybody else. It's a brownfields opportunity, but with elements of the greenfields about it as well. So it really is a wonderful opportunity for us. I've walked the ground. I've been out there with Steve Smith, who's probably a leading authority, one of the world's leading authority on the Matabeleland greenstone belts. There aren't many people, a bit like Dave Catterall in the KCB, who know as much about the exploration potential in Matabeleland as Steve. So we've really got the right person again guiding us. It's nothing like the KSZ or the Kalahari Copperbelt or Ditto because there isn't any cover. All of the small scale mining that's been occurring on this project has been conducted from surface. So it's pretty shallow exploration, and it's sitting on this 4.2 kilometre long strike. So it's a really, really attractive target. We're going to be able to start drilling on it pretty quickly, and we're going to get straight into it and see what's there. We've not made a firm commitment to acquire it until we've completed our field due diligence. So we'll have a very good idea of actually what's in the ground before we actually acquire. It's a perfect option and a perfect deal for Kavango.
Okay. Well, that's good. It answers a couple of other questions, I think, because other people are asking, you mentioned there about technical expertise, and one question was, do you know who will lead the exploration in Zim and why? And also, how quickly do you hope to release value from Nara to add value? You've mentioned there you want to get drilling as soon as possible. So, do you want to comment any more on who will lead the exploration?
There's more. So Steve is currently our interim country manager. We are in the process of looking for somebody to come in and take on the role full time, but that person will continue to work very closely with Steve. So Steve will continue in an advisory capacity. In terms of the potential for the project, I think one of the things the market completely missed is there essentially are three aspects to it. We've obviously got the surface exploration, where we'll be looking to test the bulk mining potential along this 4.2 kilometre strike that we know is heavily gold bearing because of all the mining activity there's been over the last 35 years. There's also the historic underground shaft. Now, we've recently sent someone out, a mining engineer, to go and take a look at the shaft. It goes down to 7 levels. He's been down there and he's going to be providing us with, the mining engineer is going to be providing us with his view in the near future. So there's potentially some underground potential we could test. And then finally, there's the dump. 35 years worth of small scale mining's being conducted on this site, and that's led to a dump that we estimate is somewhere between 150 to 250,000 tons. So we're looking to do some test drilling on that to test its potential for near-term revenue. So it really is a wonderful project for us, Mark. It's very different to anything that Kavango has done before.
It certainly sounds like it, Ben, and I hope maybe we can do a special feature on this project. I know we've done them in the past, and you're very articulate in talking about the geology and why you like it and what your plans are. So I'd like to do that with you at some point to try and get an understanding of why you like it. Just a final question on Zara. You say it's nothing like you've done before. How did this opportunity come about, Ben? How was it presented to you? And so anything specifically that really made you and the board get excited about it, that you had to take this option?
So I met Steve about 3 years ago. He originally pitched some Zim projects to me. We didn't proceed at that point. It wasn't an opportunity I went with, just simply because of the jurisdictional risk.
Okay.
I first went out to, but at the same time, I did see potential there. So over the next couple of years, I got to know Steve a lot more. I learned a lot more about Zimbabwe, about the country, about the operating environment, about the region's geology. And I could see the potential that there was. And I went out there for the first time last August. I went out with Steve, and he took me on a whistle stop tour around Matabele land. We drove hundreds, if not sort of near over 1,000 kilometers, definitely, looking at all the different projects, historic workings, historic mines, and it was just clear to me what potential there was, and how little investment there had been in the exploration space. So I could immediately see the macro opportunity. In terms of this particular project, Steve's been active in this part of Zim now for 15 years. And he's built a pipeline of opportunities. And this was someone that he'd got to know over his 15 years. He's done bits of work, bits of advisory on this project for the project owner in the past. So he knew it very well. And it was his recommendation to the board. Obviously, we then went out to see it. I took Peter Winterby and Brett Grist and Hillary there in March. So the four of us went to visit Zimbabwe to go and look at this project together. And everyone could see exactly the potential that Steve had reported to us. So we've been very thorough in our due diligence. We haven't rushed into this. It's taken quite a long time for us to get to the point of agreeing to do this project and to take the decision to move into Zimbabwe. So it's not one that we've taken lightly, but it is one that we are very excited about and very committed about. And as I said in my recent interview, I'm actually going to be moving down to Zimbabwe full time from January.
You must certainly see it as an opportunity, and in a sense it's good to hear that out with one project perhaps that is not delivering what you hoped for, and immediately there's another opportunity that you can go after rather than having a kind of limbo period. So I am quite keen to find out a bit more about the Zimbabwe project when we can do that. But moving away from that for the moment, just a few more questions to get through. First of all, Ditau, where are the assays for Ditau?
So we've got the assay results in. It's not a simple case of expecting to see mineralisation. You've got to remember these weren't holes that we drilled. What we are doing is we're working quite closely with Dave Catterall, and because Dave also has gold experience, and we're understanding the context of what we're looking at. So we will be putting out a Ditau update, which will explain the work that we've done over the last few months, and what our plan is going to be at Ditau moving forward.
Okay. KCB, Ben, you've said drilling KCB before the end of the year. Why not quicker?
I haven't said before the end of the year. I've said early next year. So it will all depend on the next phase of work. So we're going to put an announcement out about the next phase of exploration. It will all depend on the final target generation. If we are able to mobilise the rig sooner than that, then we will. But we think that the next bit of work might take us a bit of time. That will be a worthwhile investment because obviously we want to go for the best quality targets we can develop. But what shareholders have to remember as well is that the Karakubis block, unfortunately, in our early exploration on the KSZ under our the old team, and I don't want to keep harking on about this too much, but we focused on the wrong areas. We looked at license 082. And we did a lot of work on 036 and 037. And what we should really have been doing is looking at this Karakubis block from the beginning. So we were a little bit behind in terms of our understanding of Karakubis, but we've very much filled that gap in over the course of this year, working closely with Dave under his guidance. And we are now looking to ramp up our activity there. So we will look to drill as quickly as we can. But our goal at the moment now is Q1 next year. But of course, if we can do it sooner than that, we will.
Okay, good. And at this point, you won't know how much you want to drill. I guess this will come out in the plans, will it?
Correct, exactly. So at the moment, we need to put the plan out. We need to finalise the plan, put that out into the public domain, and then we'll be able to sort of talk more specifically about what we're going to do.
And as you say, that'll be in fairly short order, getting that plan out for the KCB. Okay, well that concludes the questions about the project specifically, Ben. There's some other questions coming that are more sort of related to the company, and one of them that came in was, clearly there was advanced selling before yesterday's RNS was released, and a number of shareholders plan to report this to the FCA. But will you be investigating this potential lack of governance? And if so, will the findings be made public? So a fairly serious accusation there.
That's a really serious accusation, Mark, and it's completely out of keeping with the way that we run Kavango. I have looked at the trades and the sales that there were immediately before we put the announcement out. I can't see how there could have been a leak, and I trust my team. As a company, we've never leaked anything. We don't engage in that sort of behaviour. The news itself was obviously bad, but there are only a few people who actually knew about it. The drill site itself was on lockdown, and the full board didn't know the full result until the point that we were actually ready to put the announcement out. We put the announcement out within an hour of hitting the final depth. So I don't see how it could have leaked. However, I am obviously mindful that this market can let itself down and some people can't help themselves. So what I've done is to order a second Section 793 report. So I'll be getting the results of that in a few weeks' time, and that will enable me to see the change in beneficial owners over this key period. So if I see anything untoward, if I do see any movement from anybody holding stock who is in any way connected to the company, then yeah, of course I'll report that, because it's my regulatory responsibility. But making statements like clearly there was advanced selling, that I'm afraid is bulletin board posters putting two and two together and coming up with 15. So I'll certainly look at it, but for my money, I think it was coincidental.
Okay. The other question I have, Ben, is how would you see your role continuing now that there is a 51% shareholder with more experience and expertise in the field than you do?
So the Consagras have been extremely supportive of both the company, the management team, and me personally. I speak with Below Consagra regularly. There is no plan, as far as I'm aware, for any change. But that being said, I'm also acutely aware that they are putting a huge amount of trust and faith into us. And if we don't deliver, then obviously we'd expect to live with the consequences of that.
Okay.
One of the things I'm really grateful about with the Consagras, though, is I look at the conversation I had with them when I talked to them about the news on this week's disappointing drill result. And their reply was, well, so be it. We didn't know what the geology was going to be. This is why we drilled it. We tested it. And Bullow's exact words to me were he didn't care if the share price went down to half a pence a share. We would carry on with our deal on the 1 pence a share that's been agreed. And yeah, I think that reflects how they do business. So I think it's great to have the really sort of steadfast backing, because I'm afraid one of the things, Mark, that I've been most disappointed about is how many of our retail shareholders have turned on us. If I look at the difficulty that we've had as a company, we've really gone for it with these projects. We haven't sat back on our laurels. We've gone out and pursued our exploration really aggressively. And I'm afraid it just hasn't gone our way. And, if I look at the really quite toxic public debate that there is around the company from a number of our shareholders, well, I would far rather have, people like the Consagras on board who understand the risks, who, recognize the work that the team has done in getting the company to this point and the quality of that work as well, and continue to back that steadfastly, even if the results go against us. That is, I'm afraid, just what happens in life sometimes. So I think in terms of sort of my role and what I see when they come on board, I think they're going to be a wonderful addition to Kavango, and they're going to give us a really great opportunity to try and build the business back up from here.
Okay. Just a final question that came in, Ben, and this I think came off from when we did the Telegram. People were asking about that bonus. The question is simply, are there any more bonuses incoming?
Well, and we're halfway through the year, so it's too early to even think about that. We've obviously, we've not had any success yet this year, but that will be a question for David Smith and the remuneration committee at the end. But as things stand, no, I think we'd need to deliver much more. Let's also see what Zimbabwe delivers for us as well. I'm feeling very confident about that particular project. So perhaps ask me that at the end of this year, Mark.
I will. Okay. I just have a final thought, Ben, just from me. I think what you mentioned there about Bullow, I think that was a very realistic reaction to the nature of the business. The mining, it is extremely risky. I do notice that there is a lot of frustration around shareholders. But ultimately, they are shareholders, and they do own the company. They do want to see results delivered. So what might you say to current shareholders, potentially existing shareholders who are disappointed with the current progress, let's say, with finding and the exploration path, and also, of course, the performance of the share price. What might you say to them going forward to how Kavango plan to deliver value for shareholders effectively?
So we always knew that the exploration in the KSZ was extremely high risk. So no one can have any complaints about that. It was, targets 500 meters depth, underneath sand cover, underneath sediments. So the chances were always stacked against us. But this is why we've put in place what really is our plan B. So the Zimbabwe projects that we have lined up, the financing that we've agreed with Pure Bond, this was all designed and put in place so that in the event that the KSZ didn't work out, we would have that to fall back on, which we now do. And I'm very glad that we have put that plan in place. Had the KSZ drill worked out, well, I think our share price would have taken off. The financing wouldn't have gone ahead. The Casagras would have certainly been very happy because they would have made a lot of money out of that as well as Kavango's valuation rocketed. But that wasn't to be. That's not how it's worked out. One of the things about this space, Mark, is I've been doing this now for a long time, and I've seen a lot of people come and go in this market. And one of the lessons I've learned is that you have to be able to learn to take losses. If you can't learn to take losses in this business and how to manage those losses, then you really shouldn't be in this game at all, and you're going to end up losing in the long run. As things stand now, we're not in a great position in terms of where our share price is. No one is under any illusions there. But we have the backing of major investors with their strong support behind us. We've got great projects to go for, both in terms of our existing portfolio in the KCB and with the new gold opportunities that we're introducing in Zim. So there is a lot for us to play for as we move forward. And in terms of the team that we've built, we've made a lot of improvements to our business. The manner in which the team is conducting itself and moving through the exploration. I put a tweet out when I was in Botswana about the quality of the drill camp, and it was phenomenal, Mark. I mean, I was so proud of what our team had achieved there and what they had built, and it just reflected the major progress that we as a company have made over the last couple of years. That hasn't yet been reflected in the results, but I do believe if we keep on down the path that we're on, with the improvements that we're making, the new talent that we're bringing in, the new experts that we're bringing in, we're going to do everything we can to go out and make a discovery. None of us like losing. We're here to win, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen.
Thank you very much for your time today. Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, and it's been a long one, but there was a fair bit to cover there. I hope we can be speaking a bit more regularly, particularly as you can explain those plans for exploration at both the KCB and Zimbabwe. But thank you very much for your time today, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.